Welcome to another episode of Escape the Slumlord. This week's episode is based on actual real life experience of something that happened very, very recently. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, um, I had an issue where one of my properties that I'm managing, that property is being rented out by the room, a pad split. And so one of the tenants members contacted me and they were informing me that there was someone in the property that didn't belong there, right? So what happened was, so we had a situation where every once in a while within a pad split, people move in and out, right? And so this particular situation, a member that was in a room, let's say number three, he stayed there for a little bit of time and from what I understand that he had someone that was staying with him. And so having multiple people in one room is not uncommon, and it does happen from time to time, but usually it goes through pad split and they pay extra, but this kind of went underneath the radar. Pad split members are supposed to report issues that happen in the property where members don't, follow the rules, but in this instance, they didn't. And, it is what it is. And so that member moved out in room number three, and then there was a member in room five. That member in room five ended up moving out probably a couple of weeks later. And I don't know why, but that member in room three, who wasn't supposed to be there, moved into room five, right? And so they contacted me and said, hey, there's someone in the room that's not supposed to be there. And so immediately for me, when something like that happens, I go to investigate, right? And typically go to investigate with the sheriff because if you're not supposed to be there, I'm gonna get you trespassed and then go from there, right? And then figure out the rest later. So I go to the property just to see what's going on, and I hear this person in room five talking, and they said that they had actually been coming in and out the house through the windows because they didn't have access to the front door, what have you. And so I contacted the sheriff. The sheriff met me out there. And so when the sheriff met me out there, we end up walking in the house. And as soon as we walk in the house, the person who was trespassing ran out through the side door and just ran out over the fence, right? Now, this is a female, actually, right? And I mean, like, ran so fast, like, you didn't even see him go. So then the sheriff went outside, and the sheriff ended up running into them outside, brought them back to the house. And they were explaining why they were there, and they're trying to tell them about the other member that was there that they're supposedly staying with, and they said that they should be there or could be there or what have you. And I was like, well, no, the last person in this room was such and such, and this person is not a member of Pad Split. They're not registered guests. They don't have a lease. They don't have a lease. They don't have no authorization to be there. Now, the thing is, in the state of Florida, we NARPM worked to change this a while ago, where well, not just NARPM, a bunch of different organizations, but they work to strengthen the squatting laws, right? And so previously it was a lot harder to get squatters out of a property. But in the state of Florida these days, if someone is squatting in the property, it's a lot easier to get them out. Just call the sheriff. And if the tenant doesn't have a lease that is signed and I believe notarized as well, the sheriff can make you leave, right? So it makes it a lot easier for property managers like myself and landlords if they're having an issue with someone who is squatting to get them out of a property. And so for this particular individual, they thought, I don't know what they thought, but I mean, they damaged that room. It was a mess. Um, and they thought that they can just stay there randomly and it not be a problem. And so we went in there with the sheriff. The sheriff came, questioned, they called back up. And ultimately, that person got arrested, right? And they got arrested, and I think they had warrants or something like that. And so she was there, talking to the police officer nonchalant. And, next thing you know, she was arrested and, taken off. And so, you know, squatting is a real serious issue that's all that a lot of landlords deal with. But in the state of Florida, you don't have to deal with the squatting issue because you have laws that are on the books um, that can help you get rid of unwanted people who are in the property. Now, if you're dealing with a tenant, then you have to go through the civil case. You have to evict someone if they have a bona fide lease. Even if they overextend and they stay past their lease, you still are going to have to do an eviction. But if they're squatting, legitimately squatting and had no lease and, they weren't authorized to be there, then you do have some leverage and some things that you can do to get them out of the property. And so, I mean, the moral of the story is squatting is not going to be tolerated, particularly if you're dealing with a real estate agent, property manager, or landlord that knows what they're doing with the property. The fact that they were there for as long as they were was fortunate on their part. But you just can't go and occupy a room and think that everything's going to be okay and nothing's going to happen because you have investors that have interest in those properties, and they're not just going to let you sit in those properties and squat and nothing happen to you, right? And so, what I want to do tonight is I want to talk to the landlords who have had squatting issues and how they dealt with it. I know I've touched on, squatting in the past or going into a property and having, people walk out of rooms. I'm talking about brand new rehab properties, right? Like, there was a property just brand new rehab. No one moved in yet, still configuring, putting everything together. I go check the property to see, just to inspect the property, and I hear someone in the property, and I call the owner, and I was like, "No, we don't have no one moving in there yet." And then, some lady walks out the room, sashaying out the house like she lived there. And that's a real thing, man. People, I mean, that's a real thing. It happens all the time. People who are homeless or don't have a place to stay, they frequently, often, just find a house that's just been recently rehabbed. The utilities are on, so they can turn on the AC or turn on the heat, get a little bit of creature comfort, and they'll stay there until someone comes and tell them to leave. And so it happens all the time. I remember when I started managing this one property out in Valrico, and I call this property a zombie pad split. And the reason why I call it a zombie pad split is because literally everyone in that property was squatting. No one was paying their pad split membership. And the owner is out of state, which is, not a big deal. But like that property was in shambles, no one was paying anything. And that happens a lot where landlords are too far away and they don't know what they're doing, and so they're not able to get people um, to respond or to adhere to any of the rules and regulations that they have. And then they have a property that's just a zombie property, right? I mean, it's there, but they're not making any money off of it. And they don't know what to do. And so at that point, they bring me in and I handle that issue. And, owners always typically have amnesia, right? After you fix their issue, then they forgot the fact that they had an issue because they act like they were doing a great job from the beginning. But, this is what have you done for me lately job type of business, right? And so you always have to make your best move. But, at the end of the day, when it comes to real estate investments and properties, you as a rental property owner, you as a landlord, you have to know what the rules and regulations are. You can't just let people squat in your properties. I recommend, particularly if the property is vacant, walking it at least once a month, right? And some people do it a lot more, right? Maybe once every 2 weeks. But if it's vacant, at least once a month, getting your eyes on it, seeing what the condition is, making sure that there's nothing happening in the property that is going to be problematic, particularly if you're going to have your property toured by prospective tenants. You definitely want to make sure that there are people that are keeping an eye on that property, right? Whether you do it yourself or you schedule an inspection, you have to make sure that you're taking the time to ensure that people are not squatting in your property. Now, the reality is this, you're never going to fully resolve that issue, right? You're always going to have a situation where people may squat in properties, right? You have the sovereign citizens who not only just squat in properties, but they file false paperwork and they take over deeds, right? And I believe there's a rule, a law in the books that if someone lives in the property that they don't own for a certain amount of time, like with no lease, let's say the property is abandoned, and they do a certain amount of improvements on that property over a certain amount of time, that the courts would deed that property over to that individual because they're taking care of it, right? And so I don't know how often that happens. But I'm sure it's something that happens in the industry enough where, well, actually, they probably had that rule put in place back in, the early, 1900s, because um, it's better than having the property vacant and decaying, right? Someone living in there and taking care of it, even though they didn't pay for it. And so that's something that's definitely um, that you see in the books and things. That's definitely something that's happened. I've seen happen in the past. But the reality is, these days, like I said, there is an ability for people who own properties to get squatters out of the property quicker, sooner, and it makes it a lot easier for the landlords. I probably should have recorded that recorded it, that squatting situation. When I think about it, it was interesting, night that night. But it wasn't a big deal. I mean, there were other people who stay at the property in the past split, and so I was talking to them a little bit. Um, and so, there was just like, yeah, she just came in and, she act like she lived there, and she destroyed the room. I mean, that room probably had probably $600-700 worth of damages in it. And that's one of the problems that you have with past split, is that they really don't take a security deposit. I mean, they have a section. They do ask for some type of down payment from prospective members, but past split is affordable housing investment strategy. And so the people who stay in passive, they're looking for a very affordable, lowest cost option possible. And so if you make the security deposit, or if you make the deposit too high, people won't stay at your past splits. And so a lot of us, it's either $100 or nothing. And so I'm working on a way um, to provide some sort of security to the owners of $1,000 for um, for them to have um, $1,000 in security deposit that's not paid by the tenant, but is covered on the owner's behalf. So if the tenant causes any type of damage, it doesn't have to come out of the owner's bottom line, right? And not just causing damage, but even evictions or even missed rents, missed payments. Those can come out of that security deposit as well. And so definitely want to implement that and provide that resource to owners, because even though it's easy to get people out when they're squatting, if they have a membership agreement or they have a lease, then you have to go through the eviction process, and that can take a couple of months. And members or owners can lose some money, waiting for a member to actually pay the security deposit, which sometimes they don't, right? And that's the reality of what it is. Sometimes they just don't. So, um, you have to take all of that into account when you're investing in property. Your vacancy rate, right? Usually that's around 10%. But outside of your vacancy rate, you have your other miscellaneous challenges and costs that you may have to deal with. So, yeah. And, rental properties is not a hard activity, but it is one of those investment strategies that is going to take time. It does take energy. And I say this every time. Rental properties are not an expense-free business, and it's not passive either. If you're doing all the work yourself, it's not expense-free and it's not passive. And you have to make sure you keep that in mind when you're investing in property. The biggest mistake that I see people make when they're investing in properties is that they don't account for all of the expenses that they might have, right? I don't see them, taking out 5% for capital expenses or 5% for maintenance or 10% for vacancy. All of that is important when you're calculating your return on investment, right? And your cap rates. And most people don't because they're trying to get the deal done. But if a deal can't cash flow, then it's irrelevant um, because cash flow is the first thing that you want to look at when it comes to investment property, unless you have another strategy that you're trying to execute on. Because there's some people who purchase properties to take the losses, right? One of the best ways to offset active income is through losses in real estate. And so there are a lot of people who purchase buildings that are failing so that they can take depreciate those losses. They call those paper losses. And over time, they improve those assets. And as they improve those assets and they get a better return on their investments, and a lot of times those real estate investments ultimately turn out to become their primary income. So all of that is something that you need to keep in mind and keep top of mind. I think we got off topic a little bit. Um, I'm over here rambling about trespassing. I'd like to hear from you though. Landlords, property managers, I want to hear about your trespassing experiences. Have you had a situation where you had to deal with um, someone trespassing on your property? Do you know of a story of someone who trespassed on a property? I mean, these days, particularly in Florida, it can be dangerous trespassing, right? Like, 'cause everybody got a gun. They have the open carry law, which means you can, bring a gun to almost anywhere. And if, you're trespassing at the wrong property, you may get a bullet, right? And so you have to pay attention to that and protect yourself from, those types of things happening because it can be very, very detrimental to your health, to trespass at the wrong property. But like I said before, it happens. It happens every day, twice on Sunday, right? People, um, find a suitable place that's just been rehabbed, and they'll move in, they'll set up shop, and then once they set up shop, getting them out. Like I said, now it's a lot easier. Back in the days, it used to be tough to get people out. Like you call the police, or like it's a civil matter. You need to sue them. You need to do an eviction to get them out. And how do you do an eviction of someone that you don't even know their names? I heard a couple of weeks before I had this issue, the trespassing issue, one of the investors indicated that someone trespassing at one of their properties, and they said they moved in with them. and just started eating their food and making it uncomfortable for them. So they ended up leaving. And so that was, a way to turn the story around. But I mean, what if, it would have got violent, right? If you're over here staying in the house of strangers, even though it's your house, because they're trespassing, so you want to turn the tables on them, so you move in and you start sitting on their couch. That's crazy, man. I don't know if that's something that I couldn't see myself doing something like that because it's just like I don't have the energy for all that, man. I mean, you gotta have time and energy to live to do something like that. I just don't have the time, nor do I have the energy to do something like that. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, real estate can be very financially rewarding if you do it right. Property management can be very financially rewarding if you do it right. Investors, can make a lot of money if they purchase the right assets and they never sell, right? That's the rule in real estate. Buy and never sell unless you're 1031 exchanging to get, larger portfolio. But for the most part, the rule is buy, never sell, use the cash flow to live on. And you're not going to make money living off of one property, right? One single family home is not going to make you rich. You need multiple single family homes, or you need multiple properties that can cash flow to really make a dent, right? And some people say $10,000 a month. But I don't even know if $10,000 a month is enough anymore, right? Like the way inflation has been, look at the value of a dollar of what it was in the 1960s and 70s, even 1920s, 30s, and 40s. You can buy a lot more with your dollar back then than you can buy today, right? And so you probably need, 50 to $100,000 a month if you want to live a wealthy lifestyle, right? $10,000 a month is probably average. If you in some place like New York, $100,000. I mean, $50,000, you're living below the poverty line in New York, right? If you have a family of four or five, you probably need $50,000 per family member, right? And I'm talking about mother, father, children, right? And so, um, yeah, and I don't even think that's enough, right? Like that's you need quite a bit of money for that to work. Um, and so and so the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. And so because of that, you need to make more money in your investments, right? You need to get a better return. But what I'm starting to see and what I believe wholeheartedly is that you have to produce, right? You have to produce something in order to make the money, right? So either you're producing assets like apartments or homes, right? Rehabbing, repairing, right? Putting, either sweat equity or rehabbing a property. If not that, then you're buying an asset that's already stabilized and finding efficiencies and ways to make it more affordable and better for tenants to move in and to live in those properties and to make a return on your investment, right? A lot of properties you'll find these days, particularly multifamily properties, they're overpriced. I had two multifamily deals that came across my desk. One was probably 2 million, the other one was 2.9 million. Both of them were excessively overpriced. The only way you can make money off those deals is if you bought it cash, or at the very minimum came to the deal with between one mil and 1.5 mil. Other than that, the deal wasn't going to cash flow. Um, and that's just the reality of it, right? Like the numbers just don't pencil out based on the current rents. Even where they projected the rents may go to, they still didn't make the kind of money that these people were asking for it. And they don't want to do creative financing, and it's just it wasn't a good look. And so to find a good deal out there, particularly in the multifamily space, is not easy. Now, what does that have to do with trespassing? Well, people trespass in multifamily homes as well, right? Like abandoned buildings. anywhere, right? If it has a heat source, it has a water source, people will go into those buildings and they will definitely trespass. That's why you see a lot of buildings boarded up, because when they're boarded up, it makes it harder for people to get in there, right? And that's what you need to do sometimes when you want to protect your asset and you don't have to deal with people staying in those properties. I have a property right now that I manage in Ybor, and that property is in the process of being rehabbed. And we had to board that all the way up, all the way around because people would try to go sleep in the vacant building, right? We had a portable toilet in front of the house and people would go in the portable toilet to sleep. Like it's crazy. And I'm like, I don't know how they're gonna go in there and try to sleep in a portable toilet. Doesn't it stink? But when they have no other option, they just, suffer through it. And so they have to put a padlock on there so that they didn't go in there. So, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is trespassing is a no-go. It's a no-no, but it happens. But as long as you know that you do have options, you don't have to tolerate anyone trespassing at your property, and you can definitely do something to get them out. Um, And moving forward, I have to do a better job with the show. I think the show is important. I think it can provide um, a lot of good information. But I'm sitting here looking at myself. I'm like, man, I'm monotone. I'm like, I'm gonna put people to sleep. I need some excitement. I need something that's gonna make people want to join the show and ask questions, make statements, provide content, insights. Um, Yeah, so I'm not gonna stay for a full hour unless we have someone that comes in and wants to talk about um, trespassing. I'm here to answer any questions that anyone has. But if no one calls in, if no one calls in and no one has any questions, then I'm going to go ahead and hop off here. I think I made my point. Trespassing is bad, but you do have options if you are a real estate agent, a property manager, or a landlord. Um, Show sponsored by PMI JCM Realty Group, also by Rent and Profit, and NARPM. If you have any questions about property management services, there's a link in there to contact me. If you are a prospective tenant and you need guidance on how to get your application approved, I can help you with that. Book a call with me, and I can walk you through it. If you are a property manager or a landlord and you have any questions about property, deal with how to deal with people who are squatting, or if you need to trespass someone, I can definitely help you with that. If you need coaching for property management and how to build a property management services as a business, I can definitely help you with that. Um, and so we have everything you need. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Just go into the description, book a call. Also, share, like, and subscribe if you like the content. I'm going to try to make the content better as we move forward. And yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll